Edward Steichen was the first real superstar in American photography. In 1936, after years as a celebrity photographer and an advertising photographer, he up and quit at the top of his game and decided to learn photojournalism. And along came World War II. At that point, Steichen was 62 years old, but he wanted to get into the game. But being a very famous person, he knew a lot of people, some strings were pulled, and he got in the door with the Navy. They thought he would be a good person to help tell the Navy's story. He formed a team, and their work was some of the most seminal photography, I believe, of World War II. Steichen himself didn't just lead the group. He went to war a couple of times on his own. The first time was on the USS Lexington, and Steichen got free run of the ship when this Fighter Squadron 16 flying F-6F Hellcats had one of the most extraordinary days of the war with 17 kills and 4 more possibilities out of 21 aircraft they encountered. These guys were just ecstatic when they returned, and Steichen wanted to produce a document of this, so he lined them up on an aircraft wing, got them all just hooping and hollering. Charles Curlie was one of the most experienced photographers when the war began. Steichen brought him in as one of his first team members. He had originally started his career in motion pictures and moved into still photography and became one of the most successful commercial photographers on the West Coast. He was assigned to document the beginning of the new USS Yorktown and her first deployment. And this is a photo of Curlie actually exiting an aircraft where he stood for 4 hours to take a picture. He took many pictures, but one of the pictures he took that day has been very famous. It's an aerial view of Wake Island burning with a silhouette of another aircraft in it. When pilots get back on board aircraft carriers, or before they fly, there's a lot of paperwork to do. And when the pilots returned, Curlie, who was often flying with them, would accompany them down to where they would be debriefed by their squadron's intelligence officer. The Steichen unit members documented a lot of this type of ancillary action, not just the aviators flying, and it gives a real good picture of also the boredom of war, along with the excitement which they catch in other images. Steichen's mandate to his photographers was to photograph the little guy, not to concentrate on the pictures that are the sexy pictures of all the equipment all the time. He said concentrate on the little guy, because the machines of war will become obsolete, but the men never will. One of the photographers who grew up the most during the war years was Wayne Miller. He was an inexperienced wannabe photographer when the war began, and Steichen put him to work. By the end of the war, he had such a touch with people that he was allowed access into a lot of the segregated areas of the ship by the people in those areas. But he had this very poignant moment that shows kind of the close quarters, but how people have kind of private moments even in all the overcrowding, with a sailor kind of looking at the pictures of his family and another one writing home. Many of the pictures the Steichen unit took were meticulously captioned with the people's names, and a lot of these people didn't make it back through the war. Ship's cook, second class Peter Gribnickas, was photographed just months before he died. His submarine still is considered missing, or as submariners say, on eternal patrol. They disappeared off Australia on their second war patrol. Kenneth Bratton, an aerial gunner, had been shot in the leg. He had a tourniquet on his leg and was still bleeding pretty badly when the flight deck crew members pulled him from the plane. Bratton would recover and later was sent on number of war bond tours because this picture was published in so many places. November 25th, 1944, on board the USS Intrepid was one of the worst days of the war for Navy aircraft carriers. 2 kamikaze pilots crashed their aircraft into the ship within minutes of each other, and the ship was a blazing inferno. But the unique thing with this photograph, this was taken by Lieutenant Barrett Gallagher. But when this happened, Gallagher documented some of the firefighting on board the ship, then put his own cameras down and started assisting and leading hose teams and was eventually awarded a Bronze Star with a V device for valor for taking part. On board the Intrepid, the day of the terrible attack, once the fires were out, the sailors all gathered and buried their dead shipmates at sea. The burial at sea was usually done because there was really no way to preserve the bodies and bring them back during a long cruise at sea. So the best way to do it was have a respectful ceremony and commit them to the deep. This is the human cost of war.